is a robbery! Everybody's down! Go ahead up!
In the 1990s, Seattle, Washington was plagued by hundreds of bank robberies. Most of the thieves were caught, but one continued to elude the FBI. Wearing a disguise, he stole millions, threatening to kill anyone who got in his way. With no leads and little evidence, agents feared the only way to stop him was to catch him in the act.
Every bank teller's worst fear is to stare down the barrel of a robber's gun. Banks use a variety of devices to discourage would-be robbers. Security cameras, silent alarms, and exploding die packs. But when an elusive bank robber targeted Seattle's banks, none of these precautions were effective. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. It would take cunning, precision, and patience to capture a master of disguise the FBI knew only as Hollywood.
Seattle, Washington, 1992. The computer revolution was growing. Technology entrepreneurs were pumping billions into the city's economy. To accommodate the newfound wealth, banks opened branches all over Seattle. But neighborhood convenience also meant more opportunity for theft. On the afternoon of June 25th, at Seafirst Bank's Madison branch,
It's a robbery!
two masked gunmen threatened to shoot anyone who did not comply with their demands.
Anybody home? We're gonna shoot!
One trained his gun on the frightened customers, while the other forced a teller to empty her cash drawer.
Stay down!
After the bag was filled, they demanded car keys from one of the customers who they had watched pull up. They warned the tellers not to hit an alarm or they would return and kill someone. The two sped away with nearly $20,000. Since the bank's deposits were insured by the federal government, the FBI was called in to assist the Seattle police.
One in front and one in the back.
Because no alarm had been tripped, the bank's security cameras were not activated. Investigators had no photos of the suspects. Customers and bank employees described the gunman as being of medium height and build. One employee heard the man holding the cash call to his partner using the name Mark.
The guy came to that door.
The robbers had worn gloves, so no fingerprints could be obtained. Investigators attempted to lift shoe prints from the desk where one of them had stood. Partial treads were recovered, which investigators believed were made by sneakers. Agents recorded the license plate number of the customer's stolen car, a Cadillac sedan. Hours later, the stolen Cadillac was discovered abandoned in a neighborhood close to the bank. Forensic technicians would pore over the vehicle's interior, but find no fingerprints, hairs, or fibers foreign to the car. 7 weeks passed with no leads. Then, on Friday, August 14th,
This is a robbery! Everybody
the same
down!
bank was
Down!
robbed again.
Jump!
Though the thief struck alone wearing a new disguise, one of the tellers believed it was the same man. He
What are you
appeared to
doing
be
down
wearing
there?
theatrical makeup.
We didn't trip off any alarms, did we? Fill that up.
His take was more than $8,000, and it was just the beginning. Over the next 3 months, the same man hit 4 more Seattle area banks. Each time, a solo gunman wearing theater makeup, a hat, and dark sunglasses was responsible. He brandished a Glock 9mm pistol and threatened to kill anyone who tried to stop him. On his 6th robbery, the thief had gotten away with $252,000, and investigators still had no leads and no name. Special Agent Sean Johnson of the FBI's Seattle field office began tracking this master of disguise, who had come to be known as Hollywood.
It's much easier to coin a name for somebody than call him tall white male in a blue hat. So with this person in particular, he wore, once again, this elaborate facial disguise, makeup. So somewhere along the line, somebody started calling him Hollywood because of that, and that name stuck with him.
Hollywood had gone silent since he'd robbed Seafirst Bank's Hawthorne branch in northeast Seattle. His take from that location exceeded $250,000. To date, Hollywood had grabbed over $320,000 from Seattle area banks.
It's the same MO. I mean, look, it's the
Authorities
same
had
MO
recovered none of the
every
stolen
single time.
cash,
Okay, he's
and they
going
still
to-
had no clues to his identity. As the months passed, investigators wondered if he had quit or moved on to another city.
It's the same demeanor.
Then, on November 24th, 1993, just over a year since his last heist, Hollywood struck again. Brandishing his trademark Glock pistol, Hollywood herded the customers together.
Don't move. Money on the counter.
He returned to Seafirst Bank's Hawthorne branch, the bank he had previously hit for more than $250,000. He asked for the reserve cash. Unsatisfied with the cash drawer take, he ordered a teller to let him into the vault in a back room. Hollywood emerged with nearly $100,000. Again, he threatened to kill anyone who hit an alarm. No one disobeyed his orders.
When Hollywood came into the banks, he was very much in control. He was polite to a degree, but it didn't make people comfortable. They were very afraid that he would use the weapon. He brandished it. It actually pointed at a number of people during the course of the robberies. So we knew that he was not afraid to show the weapon and also to possibly use that weapon against somebody who didn't obey what he told them to do.
Security strategies in Seattle banks at this time included using marked bills to trace stolen money. Another tactic was dye packs. Hidden inside a stack of bills, the packs contain red dye and an electronic charge.
All right, it's gonna work for you. Just underneath one sack.
The pack detonates and stains a thief when he crosses sensors at the bank's exit.
Nice and safe is tied in.
Silent alarms made it possible for tellers to call the police without alerting the robbers.
Wait till I get out.
Once you press that button,
Video
once you press
cameras
the button,
monitored every
the camera
corner of the
will cut
bank.
off. They'll take a picture about every 7 seconds. and they'll
So
start taking
far,
pictures.
Hollywood had somehow managed to defeat all these measures.
When they did it, you need to give us a call.
July 13th, 1994. Hollywood attacked his 10th bank in 2 years. He used a stun gun to threaten bank employees. A teller risked her life pushing a silent alarm.
754 North Independence, Westlake Bank and Trust, robbery in progress.
Hollywood looted the cash drawer, unaware that patrol units were racing to the scene.
Shut up and don't touch any buttons. 23, don't touch anyone. Go. All right, good.
He fled with nearly $112,000. A witness outside the bank saw him get into a dark blue Dodge Caravan. A second person drove it. The witness was unable to see the vehicle's license tag. After police secured the scene, another bank employee arrived for work.
Oh, very good, thank you. Just tell me what you saw.
He told police about an incident on the previous day. The employee noticed a man taking notes in front of the bank, standing next to a blue Dodge Caravan. The witness said he was too far away to get a good look at his
Look, I
face.
appreciate you coming forward, and if you can think of any other details. please
To
don't
Agent
hesitate to
Johnson,
give us a call.
it appeared
No
that
problem. Thank you
Hollywood
very
studied the locations before
much.
striking.
Be in touch with you.
He would scout out the banks days before, get a feel for the layout, who came, who went from the bank at given times.
Hollywood's planning was paying off. He had gotten away with over $660,000. He struck most often on Wednesdays or Thursdays. The next time he appeared was 6 months later. As he filled his bag, the teller overheard a radio call from beneath his coat urging him to exit. When he passed the bank's sensors, a dye pack exploded. For the first time, he had failed in a robbery attempt. A witness outside the bank took down the license plate number of the getaway car. Special Agent Johnson was able to trace the vehicle.
We ran the license plates from the cars, and they came back to a couple who lived in Tacoma, Washington, south of Seattle. So I went and talked to the couple to find out how their car had been sold.
They had advertised the car in a local paper.
He did ask if it run, and we told him
The buyer paid $1,200 in cash without test driving it. The couple described the buyer as a white male in his late 30s or early 40s, of medium height and weight. Based on their description, a sketch artist created a likeness of the suspect.
Gee, I think that looks a lot.
The FBI now had their first glimpse of what Hollywood might look like. By the spring of 1995, a masked Seattle gunman had robbed 12 banks of nearly $1 million and left behind few clues. Investigators dubbed him Hollywood for his use of disguises and theatrical makeup. The only lead that agents had was a sketch of what they believed was the face behind the mask. Special Agent Sean Johnson looked for a pattern. If he could figure out similarities among the banks Hollywood robbed, perhaps he could predict when and where he would strike next.
I went back and visited all the banks that Hollywood had hit since June of '92. What I was looking for was some commonality. How many doors were in the banks? What was the layout of the lobby? Where was the vault located? Was it downstairs, upstairs, on the main floor? What was the size of the parking lot? Was it adjacent to the bank? Was it across the street? What kind of street was this bank located on?
Johnson discovered that most of the banks were in commercial districts where area businesses made their deposits. The banks also bordered residential areas. This enabled Hollywood to blend into the surrounding neighborhood without arousing suspicion.
He liked 3 areas of the city primarily, the northeast part of town, Madison Park, which was just outside of downtown, and West Seattle. So once again, looking at the types of banks he hit, the branches themselves, and areas of the city, we came up with a pattern of likely targets.
In March of 1995, 3 years after Hollywood's initial heist, the Puget Sound Violent Crimes Task Force was formed. Staffed with investigators from 5 different agencies, they had one goal in mind: to take Hollywood off the streets. Hollywood struck most often around noon, and almost always on the last 3 days of the work week. 4 of his past 5 robberies occurred in late January or early February. Agents calculated that Hollywood appeared to be going through about $20,000 a month. Detective Mike McGann joined the task force in June of 1995. McGann knew the streets and had many bank robbery collars to his credit.
It was my belief that at least 95% of the people that I arrested were narcotics users. The other 5% I believed to be gamblers, thrill seekers, professionals, or people that were working out of sheer desperation. Where I'd classify Hollywood was that he was a well-trained, well-disciplined professional.
McGann pored over the security camera photos of Hollywood. He noted the weapons he brandished were a 9mm Glock and a stun gun. At the time, these arms were being considered as weapons of choice among law enforcement. The detective also noticed that Hollywood indexed his trigger finger on the side of the 9mm, a technique taught to police officers. Many of the robberies occurred in the late morning, between 11 a.m. and noon, precisely the time when a shift change for the Seattle police occurred. The evidence pointed to a frightening possibility. Hollywood might be a cop.
And the reason I thought he was a police officer is he knew so much about how we operated, that he was probably watching us or listening to us. He was disciplined. He was in and out of the banks quickly. He moved swiftly. He just knew a lot about the policy procedures of the bank. He knew that the areas that he was hitting in were primarily residential areas that don't have much police presence in them.
Then something else caught his eye. He noticed that Hollywood was wearing a radio on his belt. If Hollywood was communicating with a walkie, perhaps police could intercept the transmission. The detective contacted an electronics expert known as the Glitch. With his help, McGann hoped to gain an advantage.
Rectangle, gray, brown, right?
I had sat down with this person and showed him the surveillance photographs of Hollywood and the two-way radio he had, and he was able to determine the frequency most common to those radios that he would work off, and it was 2 different frequencies.
The Glitch offered to rig up a scanner in McGann's unmarked car. By eavesdropping on Hollywood, investigators hoped they could pinpoint his whereabouts and catch him in the act. The idea didn't work. Special Agent Johnson was stationed outside a bank in northeast Seattle, monitoring the radio, when Hollywood and an accomplice struck elsewhere.
It's about 11:30. I was going to break off about 12 o'clock, and all of a sudden I heard the Seattle Police radio saying we've had a bank robbery, First Interstate Bank, and that was about 2 miles from my location. I heard the physical description. I knew at that point it was Hollywood, and he had come back on one of those 3 days I predicted a year before, and we just missed him.
A bystander outside the bank got the license number. Like his first robbery, the getaway car was found in a neighborhood near the bank. The FBI traced the car back to its owner, who said he had sold it to a man for cash a few weeks earlier.
I had the owner come up and look at the vehicle, and I said, "Is there anything different about this car?" from when he sold it. And he says, sure.
Overall condition of your engine compartment here, is anything...
The owner noticed the car had a new battery.
...startly different here? You notice any difference?
I was about to say.
Agents found that the car had been wiped down inside and out. The owner also noticed that 2 of the tires had been replaced with newer ones.
So I went to trace the tires, found out they'd been bought in Tacoma, Washington. The battery was bought at a Sears store in Tacoma about 2 days after the car was purchased. So I knew at that point that these people, whether it was Hollywood and or his partners, were in the area at least 2 months before the robberies.
Working with a sketch artist, the owner described the buyer. Investigators now had 2 composite sketches, but they were still no closer to catching Hollywood. Supervisory Special Agent Ellen Glasser was brought in to head the task force. She made the decision to go on the offensive.
It's one thing to put pen to paper and to put your thought processes at work and try to solve a case. It's another when you take a proactive posture in an investigation, knowing that you might get into a confrontation with somebody like Hollywood.
The supervisor realized that a more aggressive stance would place her agents in greater peril. Hollywood had repeatedly threatened to kill anyone who tried to stop him.
We knew he had a propensity for violence and figured that if he was going to these elaborate means to disguise himself to plan the robberies, that he probably would not necessarily give up easily, as most others did. And we were concerned about safety of law enforcement and safety of customers and employees of the banks.
Okay, he's taking a lot of care.
More personnel were assigned to specific areas of the city, targeting the banks hit most often by Hollywood.
So he came up with a game plan saying, okay, we're going to be out on the streets on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays between these periods of time, knowing full well that greed would probably take the better part of Hollywood and he would come back and rob another bank, even with the amount of money he'd already taken.
On May 22, 1996, despite the increased presence of law enforcement, Hollywood hit the First Interstate Bank in the affluent suburb of Madison Park. It was his 14th known robbery. To generate leads, agents reached out to the community.
We increased the reward to $50,000 that we were offering in the community for tips. We didn't want to have the media work against us. Now, we didn't want to glamorize Hollywood and cause copycat bank robbers to go out and rob banks. But we also felt that we needed the public.
Agents saturated Madison Park with hundreds of wanted flyers. Perhaps heightened public awareness could also help eliminate that neighborhood as a potential target. Then, law enforcement could increase manpower in the remaining neighborhoods. The campaign yielded nothing. Hollywood had not surfaced in months. They consulted a police profiler to learn how Hollywood might react if and when he was cornered.
Could be someone who is familiar or someone who was taken out of...
Based on his broad knowledge of violent criminal behavior, the profiler told them that Hollywood would not go quietly.
And it was very important for us to hear him say, this guy is going to resist arrest. This guy will not want to go into custody. This guy will fight you. This guy is dangerous.
Authorities could only guess when and where Hollywood would strike next, and if his gun would remain silent. For almost 4 years, Hollywood had threatened to shoot anyone who got in his way. Agents were convinced that if he was challenged, the masked gunman would shoot to kill.
Do you understand? Get down!
By 1996, a masked gunman known only as Hollywood had robbed 14 Seattle banks.
Trip off any alarms.
He threatened to kill dozens of people for his take of $1.2 million over 4 years. Though Hollywood had not fired his weapon, agents believed that if confronted, he would kill. Supervisory Special Agent Ellen Glasser showed the task force a videotape of what could happen if they were not prepared.
We have been using for training in the FBI a video of the tragic firefight that took place in 1986 in Miami, where we lost 2 of our agents and several other agents were wounded. What they were doing that day is they were on a surveillance for 2 dangerous bank robbery suspects. So there were some obvious parallels to what we were doing.
On April 11th, 1986, the FBI confronted 2 armed bank robbers in Miami. A shootout erupted. The gunmen advanced while the agents were reloading their revolvers, killing 2 of them and seriously wounding 5 others.
That Miami shootout was a reminder of how high the stakes were. We can't always be 100% prepared, but we should be thinking, have a plan.
All right, come on. Set. Moving.
To avoid repeating the tragedy that occurred in Miami, Glasser developed more uniform procedures between the various agencies. The Seattle SWAT team trained alongside Special Agent Johnson.
We did extensive training with them, firearms training, felony car stops, how to take people out of cars, different situations and how we'd respond to a bank robbery that Hollywood had committed. And that was all done under Ellen Glasser's supervision. And her #1 concern, of course, was the safety of all the people involved.
FBI, get out, get out, get out!
Detective McGann knew they needed to make sure all personnel were on the same page.
It also gave us a chance to test our communications because the FBI doesn't work off police communications, they had their own. So what we had to do is get everybody on board on the same radio frequency.
To prevent the danger of friendly fire, all personnel were required to wear clothing with emblazoned logos.
It looked really good otherwise, but you had your head out just a little too long.
As Thanksgiving approached, Glasser believed they were as prepared as they could be.
360 is all around. It's not just.
Well, that Wednesday, that day before Thanksgiving in 1996, it started out just like any other day. I went to work thinking I was going to catch up on some of my overdue paperwork, thinking that I was looking forward to the holiday the next day, having a day off, the banks would be closed, and thinking that people needed a rest because they had been working so hard.
Agent Glasser, Detective McGann, and Detective Pete Erickson were the last ones in the office when an alert tone came over the radio at 5:41.
And upon hearing that, I knew that it was Hollywood that had hit. And I'm looking around the office thinking, well, Pete's here. And I looked at him and said, do you want to go? He goes, oh yeah, let's go. And Ellen saw me run down the hall and she's yelling, Mike, what's going on? I said, Hollywood hit, do you want to go? She goes, yes. So she grabbed her coat and we all left the task force office. And my car was parked right outside the front door. We ran down and turned on the lights and the siren and put the light on the roof, and away we went.
Multiple suspects had robbed a bank in Lake City, the Seattle suburb just minutes from task force headquarters.
As soon as we got into Mike's car, I could hear the Seattle police radio traffic. And I remember hearing the references to the makeup. And it was really those references to the pancake makeup that made it resonate in my head that this was it. This was it.
They got another call. A witness had seen a vehicle exit the bank's parking lot in an erratic manner. A vehicle matching the description had been spotted. The Police believed they had found the getaway car. It turned out to be a false alarm. The engine was cold. 20 minutes had passed since the first call. McGann was sure that Hollywood had transferred to a different vehicle by now.
He would need a place to change. He would need a place to take that makeup off, that wig off, to change his clothing, to put the weapons, you know, so put the weapons away, or the money. The getaway car there would most likely be a van.
Detective McGann continued to cruise the side streets in the residential area near the bank. From past robberies, McGann and Agent Glasser knew this was where he would most likely change vehicles.
Some units were responding to one location, and Mike was saying, that's not him, that's not him. He'd patrolled in these streets. He'd grown up in Seattle. He knew every nook and cranny of the town in that area.
After several minutes of crisscrossing the main roads, they pulled up behind a white van.
And there was condensation on the insides of the windows. I mean, heavy condensation where the beads of water were dripping down on the insides of the van. But there were flashlights moving about the van, real quick light, and it had dark windows, tinted windows on it.
McGann had a strong suspicion it was Hollywood. They called in to check the plates. The driver of the van ignored the emergency lights and pulled away.
Dispatch. Vehicle.
The investigators had no way of knowing how many persons were in the van, or if they had any weapons. If it was Hollywood, they knew at the very least he would be carrying a 9mm Glock.
By this time, I knew he knew we were behind him. He could see me. He just knew we were there. And he drove northbound and slowly came to a stop.
They prepared to approach the idling van.
Good!
When I got out, all I saw was this person holding the rifle at port arms and stepped out from the side and took aim at me with that rifle. And right then I feared that I was going to be shot and killed.
The rifle jammed. McGann fired into the rear of the van. The chase had turned into a firefight.
Get in.
On the night before Thanksgiving 1996, 3 investigators had just fired at a fleeing van after its driver had attempted to shoot them with a rifle. They believe the van held a man known only as Hollywood, an elusive bank robber. Special Agent Sean Johnson responded to the call for backup.
My pager went off. I looked at it and knew immediately there had been a bank robbery. I called the office and was told that Hollywood, based on the description that they had gotten, Hollywood had just robbed a bank, Seafirst Bank, Lake City branch in the north part of town.
Still several miles away, Johnson raced to the location. As the van came to another stop, backup arrived. The gunman ducked back into the van and the chase resumed. Special Agent Glasser felt it was a miracle the three of them had survived unharmed.
I think that's partially by the grace of God, because these rounds were found in the windshield of the car that was behind us, so they went right over us.
They continued to pursue the unidentified gunman through the residential neighborhood. The agent updated their new position for approaching units. They followed the van until it disappeared around a turn. Fearful he might be driving into an ambush, McGann got out and continued the pursuit on foot. Detective McGann told a canine officer to cover the right side while he moved up on the left.
And I'm trying to think, am I doing everything right? I'm alive, there's no bullet holes in me, my coworkers are alive, plenty of help is behind us. And I knew plenty of help was in front of us, coming at us.
Up ahead, they could see the lights from an approaching Seattle police cruiser. It intercepted the van, forcing it off the road. The van had come to rest in the front yard of a house. Investigators still had no idea how many were in the vehicle.
Right.
Out of the van! Keep your hands where we can see them!
Right. Doors are open!
The side doors burst open, but no one came out.
Cover me! Out of the van! Keep your hands out where we can see them! Keep your hands out!
Two men, badly wounded, were pulled from the van.
Keep your hands out!
One suspect had taken 3 rounds.
Hands on your back!
The bullets had penetrated his left shoulder, thigh, and stomach. The other had been hit in his right shoulder.
When I looked down at him and said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Steve." I said, "Steve what?" And he said, "Steve Myers." And I said, "Are you Hollywood?" And he says, "No."
The other suspect was taller and heavier than the gunman from the security camera photos. Police believed he was not Hollywood either. The detective turned his attention to the van, but no one else was inside.
And I'm thinking, where's the third suspect? You're saying the suspect got out. Are you positive? And they're saying, yes, he got out when he saw us. He took off. So I'm thinking, oh, my God.
Investigators quickly organized a search, both on the ground and in the air. A third suspect, probably Hollywood, was on the run. Police believed he was armed. They did not know how far he could get if he was wounded. As the search continued, a forensics team processed the van.
And in the back of the van, there was a guitar case that had been converted into a gun-carrying case, and a blue nylon bag that had money in it. And it was a big bag of money.
The robbers had left behind more than $1 million. They also found pieces of a latex mask, most likely belonging to Hollywood. Scattered around the blood-soaked interior, investigators found an assault rifle, a semi-automatic shotgun, 2 pistols, and several boxes of ammunition. Hollywood's Glock 9mm pistol was nowhere to be found.
Could have taken hostage in a house, yeah. That did cross my mind, that, you know, maybe he ran into a house and was holding a family hostage and would hold them until, you know, the early hours of the morning, or until traffic died out, or he could be watching us. He could be one of us.
Wherever he was and whoever he was, Hollywood had eluded the FBI once more. After 4 years of pursuit, the masked bank robber known as Hollywood had eluded capture again following his 15th known bank robbery. But 2 of his accomplices had been taken into custody. One was identified as Mark Biggins. Biggins had been Hollywood's accomplice in 3 of the robberies, including their first. He wore the Reagan mask. The other accomplice was Steve Myers, the man who drove Hollywood's getaway cars. Special Agent Johnson pressed Myers for Hollywood's real name.
You need to tell me who this person is, where he is. And he finally said, okay, I'll tell you. The person you're looking for is Scott Scurlock.
Scott Scurlock wasn't a police officer. He was a local actor. Agents moved in on his 20-acre ranch in Olympia, Washington, an hour south of Seattle.
Yeah, search warrant. Clear left.
But no one was there.
Clear.
Investigators found a semi-automatic 9mm Glock.
Okay. Secured up. Very nice. All right, check it out.
Agents recovered $23,000 in cash. The searchers also found a dozen pairs of canvas athletic shoes, the same kind that Hollywood was reported to have worn in several robberies.
Check over here.
Behind the house, agents approached a barn.
All right, clear left. Room clear.
Inside, they found tools, building materials, and equipment. On the dusty floor, one of the agents noticed some footprints that led to a trap door. It opened into an underground chamber.
See a light switch anywhere?
Right here.
Agents had no way of knowing if Hollywood was hiding there with a gun.
Help yourself. Go up down there.
Scurlock wasn't there.
All right, clear left.
But behind a curtain, they discovered a second room.
Lighting switch anywhere?
It was a complete makeup studio. The agents also found a photograph of Scurlock without makeup.
Is this who we've been looking for?
It's gotta be.
Is this Hollywood?
That's the man. It's gotta be.
Behind the barn, Special Agent Sean Johnson and his team came across a large treehouse.
It sat about 60 feet up into the trees. It was built on 7 cedar trees. It consisted of 3 stories. It had numerous ramps that extended out from the treehouse. It was something to behold.
Agents searched the treehouse. They found no sign of Scurlock. Police were still patrolling the neighborhood where the shootout had occurred the night before. Searchers had combed the area, but found no trace of the fugitive. Then a report came in that a man had spotted someone hiding in a camper behind his mother's house.
Come out of the trailer.
Police responded and approached the camper.
Sir, police officer, come out of the trailer.
They identified themselves, but received no response. An officer emptied a can of pepper spray into the window.
Police, come out of the trailer.
A shot rang out.
Chief, get your back up.
police set up a perimeter around the camper and called in reinforcements. Agent Johnson had just returned from searching Scurlock's property.
Within minutes of arriving at the office, having not even unloaded any evidence, I heard on the Seattle police radio shots had been exchanged at a location about 2 blocks away from the previous night's events. So without even beginning to unload the evidence, I took off again, heading northbound out of town, lights and sirens to this location.
Every available unit converged on the site. Supervisory Special Agent Glasser had gone home after the shootout.
By that point in time, I had decided not to cook a turkey on Thanksgiving. I had changed the reservations for where we were going to eat Thanksgiving to a later time so that we could all be together as a family. And we were almost out the door when we got a call from the office that Hollywood was barricaded in a trailer.
No other shots had been fired since that first exchange.
Come on, Scott, come out. Just show up.
Scurlock's girlfriend was brought to the scene.
Fine. Anything. We just need to know you're okay.
If it was the fugitive, perhaps she could persuade him to give himself up.
Come on, Scott, come out.
There was no response. Nobody knew for sure who was in the camper. Out of options, the SWAT team was called to action. Hoping to flush out the suspect, they fired 2 rounds of tear gas into his refuge. They heard nothing. SWAT members entered cautiously.
And the initial radio communication from the SWAT team said there's lots of blood, but we see no body. And my first reaction to that was, is this guy a ghost or what? How can there be no body? And then just seconds later they say, we've got a body.
Through the smoke, a white male could be seen lying lifeless on the floor. A gun near his head. Scurlock's photograph was compared to the body. It matched. The coroner later determined that his death had been self-inflicted. Mark Biggins recovered from his wounds. He and Steve Myers pled guilty to bank robbery, assault on a federal officer, and firearms violations. They were sentenced to 21 years in a federal prison. Scott Scurlock had hidden behind a mask for 4.5 years. But when the FBI struck back, the man they called Hollywood found there was no place left to hide. In the mid-1990s, a gang of professional bank robbers raided cities across 7 states. Disguises and speed protected their identity from cameras and the police. They stole hundreds of thousands of dollars, always leaving a bomb to terrorize their victims. With no leads and little evidence, the FBI had to find the bandits before someone got killed.
Across the Midwest, a band of armed robbers struck banks at the rate of nearly one per month. They attacked with lightning precision and lethal force. They were in and out in 5 minutes. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The stakes were raised when the FBI discovered the robbers had an agenda beyond personal wealth. To stop these violent extremists, the FBI need to capture their terrorist leaders.
In 1994, the citizens of Ames, Iowa enjoyed the peaceful life provided by a small college town. Many newcomers had moved to Ames because of the area's low crime rate. On January 25th at 10:30 in the morning, 2 men entered a bank in town.
All right, this is a robbery! Everybody down on the floor! Down, down, down on the ground! Down, get on the
They
floor!
wore ski masks and held semi-automatic pistols. They ordered everyone to the floor.
Get down on the ground, down!
The teller managed to set off a silent alarm without being seen.
Get down!
The FBI office in nearby Des Moines was alerted to the robbery in progress. The agency had primary investigative jurisdiction in crimes involving federally insured money. Agents immediately responded, but they were 30 miles away from the bank.
Down! Underlay!
Facing the ground, don't look at me.
The bandits quickly emptied the cash drawers.
Don't move!
Don't look at me, face the ground.
One of them pulled out what appeared to be a bomb. He warned that no one should move for 5 minutes or it would explode. The employees and customers evacuated as soon as they could.
Well, you know, we said a
The
robbery.
local police cordoned off the bank as explosive experts worked inside.
Yeah.
The bomb proved to be a diversion. 2 road flares bound with duct tape. The employees described how one of the gunmen leaped over the counter to grab the money. They grabbed thousands in cash and were in and out of the bank in less than 5 minutes. Agents interviewed the witnesses.
So did you guys want to add anything else?
They said the gunmen sometimes used Spanish when talking to each other. The security camera provided photographs of the robbery. Ski masks effectively hid the faces of the assailants. But investigators had images of their disguises and their weapons. 9mm semi-automatics. Because the perpetrators wore gloves, they did not leave any fingerprints. Detectives used electrostatic tape to recover a footprint from the counter. The precautions taken by the bandits had effectively obscured their identities. Special Agent Ken Moore of the Des Moines, Iowa FBI field office was immediately concerned that they were dealing with dangerous professionals.
Now, most bank robbers try to enter banks as quietly as possible, go up to one teller counter and proceed to rob the bank, and then leave as quietly as they can. These individuals came in very violently, fast.
Agent Moore wanted to apprehend the suspects as quickly as he could. But the FBI had nothing of value to lead to their identity. Several weeks later, a communique came into the Des Moines office. It alerted area FBI of a February 15th bank robbery in Davenport, Iowa. Agents contacted the Davenport office to see if the incident might be related.
Hello? Yes, well, I think we're working on
The agent described 2 gunmen wearing ski masks and black overcoats that had invaded a Davenport bank. The thieves used the same Spanish phrases as the Des Moines bandits. They also hopped over the counter to empty the cash drawers. There was one significant difference. This time, the bandits left a real explosive, a pipe bomb instead of a fake. Fortunately, the detonator was missing. Disarming it had slowed down the investigation.
What that device does is it requires more manpower that could be out conducting an active investigation. Instead, they're at the bank making sure things are safe.
Investigators believed that the similarities between the incidents were more than coincidental.
After the Davenport bank robbery, we realized that the same individuals were responsible for both bank robberies. This was our first connection to possible serial bank robbers.
Okay. See you later. Have a good night.
In the next 4 months, Cincinnati, Green Bay, and Kansas City suffered similar crimes.
There appeared to be a pattern of their robberies. There appeared to be 2 regions where they were robbing banks, the Midwest region as well as the Ohio region. We were trying to logically connect those 2 regions and why banks were being robbed that way.
The robberies occurred between 10 and 11 in the morning when banks were less populated. Each time, the bandits were out in less than 5 minutes, always leaving an inert bomb as they fled. The wide geographic spread of targets made their next moves impossible to predict.
I'll get back with you.
The FBI needed to find some evidence that would lead to the suspects. On June 8, 1994, the bandits hit a bank in Springdale, Ohio. They drove away with over $11,000. A bystander saw them use a brown Chevrolet as their getaway car. On June 17th, a security guard became suspicious of a car on his employer's lot. It had been sitting for a week without anyone claiming it. He saw a police scanner. He also spotted a pager next to a stained $20 bill. A Springdale officer came out to check the car. He began a search to ascertain the vehicle's ownership. He made an effort to force open the glove compartment. A grenade tumbled out. The hand grenade turned out to be another inert explosive, but its presence linked the car to the bank robbery. Agents used the car's serial numbers to track down the dealership where it had been sold. They talked to the salesman who had handled the deal. The sale had been made less than 2 weeks earlier, but he couldn't give a description of the buyer. The dead ends left investigators feeling the pressure.
We were becoming frustrated because the escalation of violence seemed to have been increasing. They were more brazen, were brandishing firearms, scaring bank employees. They were scaring customers, leaving behind booby traps. So we were very frustrated and we were concerned.
On December 27th, the bandits finished 1994 with their 12th robbery in as many months. They hit a bank outside St. Louis. This time, there were 4 gunmen.
Now we were concerned over possible takeovers of banks, possible entry into the bank vault. With 4 people, there's a lot more they can do.
Bystanders at the St. Louis robbery saw the bandits put on their ski masks before entering the building. A teller got a glimpse of one of them inside the bank. These witnesses helped FBI artists make composite sketches of the suspects. The FBI distributed the drawings to other agencies in the media.
It was slightly curved.
They hoped it might bring someone forward who might know something more. The television and news reports generated hundreds of calls into the FBI offices. Agents followed up on all credible tips, but none provided any lead value. The assailants communicated with the media as well. They sent letters and cartoons to newspapers. The correspondents ridiculed federal agents in their attempts to catch them. In one letter, the gang dubbed themselves the Midwestern Bank Bandits. The bandits sent another message to authorities in one of their getaway cars. An investigator searched a vehicle used in a robbery near St. Louis. On the front seat, the gang had left a newspaper clipping about Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. In less than 2 years, the bandits had hit at least 15 banks across the Midwest. By the end of August 1995, agents from 7 states and FBI headquarters gathered in Louisville, Kentucky.
If we can get a shadow or something, raise the serial number on this.
All the offices were now working together to identify and apprehend the suspects. All information and leads were to be channeled through a single office, then distributed to the others.
Right, we'll work on that. See if we can't raise the serial number or something off it.
Special Agent Moore in Des Moines served as the point man.
The meeting also resulted in all case agents going back to their office, reviewing all files to see if there's anything they may have missed or anything of lead value that might assist us in identifying the suspects.
Supervisory Special Agent David Welker found a phone tip that came into his Cincinnati office after a June 1994 robbery. The informant had named 2 men as the leaders of the Midwestern Bank Bandits, Peter Langen and Richard Guthrie.
We determined at the time that they had criminal backgrounds, that as we set out our leads, that they had been arrested in Georgia for the robbery of a Pizza Hut. And then we found also at the time that the U.S. Secret Service had looked at Langen as a result of threats made to the president.
At the arrest, police seized semi-automatic guns and grenades, weapons similar to those used by the bank bandits. The suspects served a brief prison sentence before being released. Agent Welker was able to pull their mugshots. He compared the photographs with the artist's sketches made after the St. Louis robberies.
And they were so close then that it was phenomenal. It appeared that the composite artist used these photographs to draw the composite drawings. That's how close they were.
Agents now had names for the gunmen. In pursuing them, the FBI was about to uncover a far more deadly plot than bank robbery. In 1995, the FBI hunted the Midwestern Bank Bandits. The day before Thanksgiving, the 4 gunmen struck another bank in St. Louis, their 21st robbery. Their disguise included ATF hats, the same caps worn by federal agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They also left their signature pipe bomb. None of these explosive devices had gone off. They had either been inert or lacking detonators. By now, agents knew how to defuse the bombs themselves. They weren't going to let the ruse slow the investigation down anymore. Supervisory Special Agent David Welker of the Cincinnati office had names for 2 of the bandits. But Peter Langen and Richard Guthrie were living underground, surfacing only when they struck another bank.
Clearly, we've identified the right people. We're trying to develop as much information about these people and their contacts as possible. But the best part about it is we have leads to follow.
In the intervening months, the informant who had provided the names had moved from Ohio.
The first set of robberies to
tear gas
canister.
Special Agent Ed Woods of the Cincinnati FBI field office tracked the informant to Georgia, where he lived with his new wife and child.
This fella had been an associate of Langan and Guthrie in the past, had removed himself from that lifestyle and was starting a new life for himself. And I think he was ready to put all that behind him. So when I interviewed him, he cooperated fully.
I need to ask you a few questions.
The informant had met Langan in 1991 at a white supremacist rally.
The Bible says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, and a black neighbor.
They shared similar beliefs about race and government. A year later, Langan proclaimed his intention to form the Aryan Republican Army. It was going to start a revolution against Washington and its federal agencies like the FBI and ATF.
It's your tax money they're taking.
Langan had been inspired by the Order, an established terrorist group.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? You're breaking your back. You know what I'm saying?
The Order had financed their racist agenda by robbing $4 million from banks and armored cars.
Hey, how's it going?
That evening, Langan introduced Guthrie as his compatriot.
I'll explain all about that.
2 months before the first bank robbery, they asked the informant to become a member of the Aryan Army.
Well, I've got some stuff here. I think that
He declined to join the new gang,
we can certainly use some of it. Yeah, here.
but he did agree to pitch in.
What we got from this cooperating witness was the scope of their activities, the surgical planning for their bank robbery activities, the fact that now we learned for the first time that their activities aren't just bank robbery and criminal matters. It relates to white supremacy.
The informant helped Langan case the bank in Springdale, Ohio. But before that June 1994 robbery, the informant had a change of heart and cut himself off from the bandits.
Sometimes, things like that.
He had participated enough to be charged as an
I need you
accomplice.
to help as we go on here.
The FBI promised not to prosecute him if he assisted.
For right now.
They were ready
I
to make a
appreciate it.
deal to capture Langan and Guthrie.
Once we determined that they had broken off other white supremacist organizations to form their own, it certainly ratcheted the investigation up just another notch.
Agent Welker suspected it was only a matter of time before the Midwestern bank bandits turned their racial prejudice into violence. The gang was back in Cincinnati, hitting another bank in December 1995. During their escape, one of the bandits bumped into a teenager. The gunman demanded her purse. She refused to comply. Only the sound of approaching sirens prevented the young woman from being seriously hurt. Betting that the bandits were still in the area, Agent Welker brought the informant to Cincinnati.
You know the fellows that are involved.
Upon arriving, the informant agreed to re-enter the white supremacist movement.
Make sure that he has your pager.
Agents instructed
Okay.
him to page the FBI when he
And
made contact
you
with
and
the
I stay
suspects.
contact now. So, say what you
But
do.
investigators became frustrated when more than a week passed without any results.
Since he's been here for a week and a half and has provided no information at all and has arranged no meeting, has virtually done nothing, I was more than skeptical as to what this cooperating witness could do for us. And I was prepared to send him home because of my disbelief at the time.
At 2:30 in the morning of January 17th, 1996, the informant paged the FBI. The call roused investigators from sleep to a secret meeting. The informant claimed to have found Guthrie. He was finishing dinner with a friend when Guthrie unexpectedly showed up. The informant invented a reason for being in Cincinnati and engaged the suspect in small talk.
Got a minute I can talk to you outside? Sure, come on. Hey, you got a minute?
Guthrie invited him out to his van to continue the conversation in private.
Where are you chilling?
While they sat in the parking lot, the suspect asked his old friend to reconsider joining the gang.
Some serious stuff here, isn't it? You talking about a little bit.
Guthrie showed off an assault rifle and a bag of armor-piercing bullets.
Yeah.
The informant provided a partial license plate number and description of Guthrie's van. Agents still doubted his credibility.
So I had Agent Woods arrange to have the cooperating witness in the FBI office at 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. I didn't want him to know why he was there. I just wanted him to be there. And then I arranged for my division's polygraph examiner to be there, and I wanted a polygraph of him. I wanted to make sure that what he was telling us was true.
The informant agreed to take a lie detector test.
I think he's lying.
You think he's lying?
It's all over the place.
Give him a chance and he didn't tell
The examiner determined that the young man had been deceptive in his answers during the test.
I'm telling the truth. Listen.
The piece of paper there, this polygraph doesn't lie.
Listen,
He
I have
insisted he was
somebody
telling the
who's
truth.
I can make a quick phone call. Please, let me make one phone call.
1 second.
I can prove it. I can
give
prove
you
it.
one more
phone call.
chance.
Yes,
One
come on.
phone call. Make it a good one.
To prove it, he placed a call to the friend with whom he had had dinner.
Hey, what's going on, man?
Good, man. Yeah.
The speakerphone allowed the agents to hear everything.
Hey, what happened with you and Guthrie, man? He took you out in the van. Yeah, Guthrie wants you in, man. Yeah.
Without prompting, the
Yeah,
friend
we did. We
immediately
spent some
asked
time
about his
together.
time with Guthrie.
So now we had to make a decision, and the decision is, do we believe the polygraph or do we believe the phone call? I think at the time, I think the decision we made was the right one. That is, we have to believe the phone call. It was an unprovoked response by the friend.
The informant arranged to meet Guthrie on Monday at their mutual friend's apartment. FBI agents assembled an arrest team. They staked out the location, ready to capture the suspect when he arrived. The informant waited inside the apartment. The friend did not know why the meeting had been arranged. Guthrie had promised to come sometime between 4 and 5 p.m. 5 o'clock came and went without the white supremacist arriving. The informant knew that more than his credibility was at stake. So was his cooperation agreement. If the FBI believed he had deceived them, they would turn him over to prosecutors for bank robbery. At 5:20, there was still no sign of Guthrie. It looked like the suspect would not show up. Outside, the arrest team grew impatient.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, he's here.
It was Guthrie on the phone. He said they could meet at a nearby pizza restaurant in 30 minutes.
All right, 30 minutes. Campbell, you down?
Yeah.
The informant needed to get word to the arrest team. He told his buddy he was going out for cigarettes.
Hey, I'm sorry about the delay. Everything's taken care of, though.
The informant told the agents about the call.
Yeah. The meeting's been changed a little bit. We're meeting just a little bit up the road. Everything's still fine, though, okay?
I think he's telling us the truth. I hope he is. Otherwise, he's going to jail. Okay, guys.
They
we got a
alerted
new
the SWAT
location.
team to the new location. Several cars set out for the pizza parlor. The agents could not help but wonder if this was the location or just another diversion. Along the way, traffic separated the arrest team One agent was passing a convenience store parking lot when he spotted Guthrie. He turned around and radioed to the others that the suspect had been sighted. Guthrie got into his van and started driving. The agent stayed on the van's tail, hoping the rest of the team would catch up. He was alone, following a suspect considered highly dangerous. But he was determined not to let Richard Guthrie get away. In January 1996, the FBI pursued Richard Guthrie. The suspect was wanted for 22 bank robberies. An agent separated from the arrest team had spotted the suspect at a Cincinnati parking lot and began tailing his van. He reported by radio his progress to the others.
You got him in a cul-de-sac. Where are you?
Guthrie noticed that he was being followed. An informant had reported that he was armed with automatic weapons and armor-piercing bullets. The suspect tried to lose his tail. The arrest team caught up with the lone agent and joined the chase. Guthrie couldn't shake them.
Get him in a cul-de-sac.
He unwittingly turned into a cul-de-sac. Trapped, he abandoned his van. Agent Ed Wood sprinted right behind. He caught up to the gunman.
It was almost as if it was in slow motion where like you could almost read his mind, what he's thinking. He's thinking, I believe, is this it? Is this the last standoff of this white supremacist? And quite frankly, what I expected him to do was to turn and start firing.
Guthrie came to a riverbank. He had no escape. Agents boxed him in.
I've been in law enforcement for over 20 years, and I've never seen a look on a face like Guthrie's at the time. And Guthrie, as he was looking at us, he was deciding whether he wanted to die right then. He was deciding whether he wanted to pull a gun and take on everybody who was standing there.
The suspect chose to live. He submitted to arrest.
Catching him, it was a huge relief, and catching him to where there was no violence attached to the arrest was even a greater relief.
Once in custody, Guthrie began talking.
Banks around the Midwest.
He told investigators how he stayed in touch with the other primary suspect, Peter Langan.
What were their names? What are these numbers right here?
The friends used coded voicemails to contact one another. He handed over his pager and PIN number.
Now, how about this one right here?
He claimed his next meeting with Langan was to be in Indianapolis.
John, did you get that?
Guthrie's lawyer made an agreement with the FBI. For later consideration in sentencing, they could take the suspect with them to use as bait. Under the arrangement, the accompanying agents weren't allowed to question Guthrie about his crimes. Agent Welker sought another way to ply information from the bandits' leader.
I assigned 2 agents to guard him. One agent is a former Harrier pilot in the Marine Corps, and the other is our principal firearms instructor. And of course, over a 2-day period, there was a lot of discussion going on. I was well aware that Guthrie had an interest in flying, and he had a keen interest in weapons.
During the trip, the agents engaged Guthrie in long conversations about common interests. The congenial strategy worked.
That would really work.
The assailant warmed up to his accompanying agents and began volunteering information on the robberies. Guthrie admitted that he had lied to investigators. His rendezvous was really supposed to take place in Columbus, Ohio, not Indianapolis, where the investigators had taken him.
2709 control.
He gave them the address of a safe house. He told them Langan was heavily armed. He would not come out without a fight. An FBI arrest team assembled the next morning in Columbus. Langan's van was parked next to the duplex Guthrie had described. The plan was to wait until the suspect exited his home and got into his van. Then as he pulled out, FBI cars would box him in. This would contain him and prevent a vehicular pursuit. All escape avenues were blocked off. At 9:30 a.m., Langan left the duplex carrying a canvas bag. Agents suspected this held an assault weapon. He got into his van, but failed to start the engine. The arrest team waited for the word.
Once he was observed getting into the van, the adrenaline for everyone there was flowing. Everyone knew something was going to happen.
The suspect sat motionless. Agents didn't know if he was planning something. He seemed as if he anticipated the arrest. Finally, the signal went out to move in.
Let's take him, let's take him.
In what agents thought was a suicide move, Langan had decided to put up a fight. On January 18th, 1996, the suspected leader of 22 bank robberies decided to shoot it out with an FBI SWAT team. Supervisory Special Agent David Welker of the Cincinnati office led the arrest team.
Someone who's going to pull a gun on 20 or more FBI agents is one nasty dude. He's one nasty criminal.
Peter Langan was one gun against many. SWAT team bullets pummeled the van. It was over within moments, but not before 50 rounds had been fired. Langan survived and surrendered. Despite the hail of bullets, he suffered only minor injuries to the face and back. After 2 years of pursuit, the leaders of the Midwestern bank bandits were now in custody. 2 other accomplices remained at large. The van was filled with semi-automatic guns, ammunition, and grenades. Inside the canvas bag, agents found a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. It was the same make of weapon that the bank bandits used. Evidence inside the duplex confirmed the bandits were more than a gang of thieves. The house contained an armory big enough to equip a small cadre of terrorists. Agents found ski masks, FBI hats, police uniforms, and false IDs from nearly every state of the Union. Books and literature detailed the gang's creed of militant hate.
I'm Commander Pedro.
Investigators discovered a tape among the propaganda. It targeted young white males for recruitment into the Aryan Republican Army.
Today, we are preparing to take over the USA. Tomorrow, the world.
Please have a seat.
A Columbus bank teller had briefly glimpsed the face of one of the bandits 17 months earlier.
See anybody that you recognize, please?
Detectives gave her a photo lineup, hoping she could remember enough to make an ID.
This gentleman here?
Despite the intervening months, she picked out Langan from the array of similar-looking men.
Bank and robbing it. I mean,
While Langan refused to cooperate, Guthrie agreed to tell all he knew.
I don't know.
Agents debriefed him 10 hours a day for 10 straight days.
How many accomplices did you have?
He could recall all the places, times, and dates. It took 99 pages to detail the 22 robberies.
Scott and John, okay.
But when it came to his at-large accomplices, Guthrie only knew their first names. The bank bandits had been assembled like an underground terrorist cell. Personal information on others was kept to a minimum to prevent capture. Guthrie could only offer that the man he knew only as Scott was involved in music. The man he knew as Kevin was the nephew of a police
This is
officer.
Supervisor Special Agent.
Both lived in the Philadelphia area.
Yeah.
The scant information was forwarded to Pennsylvania. Special Agent Joe Hendrickson of the Philadelphia FBI field office was initially overwhelmed by the request.
There was no hope of finding these people with that information. I sat back and had a cup of coffee, and then I said, well, I'll go contact the Philadelphia Police Department. And there's a possibility that maybe their personnel records indicate nephews, but I was in much doubt that that type of record existed, because I know that in my outfit, I did not list nieces and nephews in my personnel file.
Philadelphia had 7,000 police officers, any one of which could be Kevin's uncle. The search began at the intelligence division of the police department. An officer knew immediately who the FBI was looking for. The division had been keeping tabs on white supremacists in the area. Intelligence officers had kept them under surveillance for over a year. Officers often spotted them meeting on a farm belonging to Mark Thomas.
Over the years, the Philadelphia Police Department had been taking down tags at various rallies and so forth. And at some point in time, they took down a tag, ran the tag, and it came out to Kevin McCarthy. And then they said, you know, we've got a lieutenant here that has that name. They contacted him, and lo and behold, they found out that Kevin McCarthy was attending Aryan Nation rallies.
Hendrickson put a surveillance squad on Kevin McCarthy. They observed him repeatedly visiting a recording studio in Philadelphia. Agents noted the license numbers of the cars outside the business. They ran the plates for all the people going in and out. One of the vehicles belonged to a man named Scott Stediford. He managed the studio and also played drums in McCarthy's band. From his amateur photo, Guthrie confirmed that this was the Scott he had worked with. Using that same photo, a witness also recognized Stediford as the getaway driver in the Des Moines robbery. An arrest warrant was sent to Philadelphia. The studio presented too many risks for officers to invade en force. Agents could not be sure who was inside and what weapons might be hidden. They didn't want another shootout.
We're writing it for my mom, actually, and these are the lyrics I came up with. And
Two undercover agents posed as father and daughter. The female agent asked Stediford about the cost of studio time. She claimed she wanted to record a song for her mother.
Can you grab your guitar?
As Stediford considered a quote, the undercover agents confirmed that he was alone and unarmed.
Okay, turn around. Up. You're under arrest. Turn around. Hands behind
The agents drew on him. They placed him under arrest.
Nothing to do with it.
The FBI did not have an arrest warrant for Kevin McCarthy. They feared that he would run once he heard about Stediford's capture.
What we ended up doing was we brought his uncle, the Philadelphia police officer, with us. We felt that with his blood relative, the law enforcement presence, and the total set of circumstances, that we hoped that he would somehow be convinced that the thing to do would be to cooperate.
The uncle entered the basement bedroom. He disarmed his sleeping nephew. The agent woke the young man.
Kevin? Special Agent Emerson, FBI. Son?
He began explaining that it was in McCarthy's best interest to cooperate with the FBI.
Yes, okay. We kind of know what went on today. We know who
Only
did it.
suspicion tied the young man to the crimes.
Things are going to go a lot easier on you, all right?
The agent needed a confession.
You have something you want to give us?
He showed McCarthy the 99-page admission made by Guthrie.
And when he saw this report describing every bank robbery, what they did, where they went, he realized that we had all the information. He just didn't realize that we had no evidence.
The young man was overwhelmed. He voluntarily turned over the weapon and clothing he used in the robberies. When he began to confess, his uncle stopped him and advised him to get a lawyer. With all the suspects now in custody, agents considered their investigation wrapped up. On July 3rd, 1996, Richard Guthrie pleaded guilty to 19 bank robberies. He agreed to testify against his accomplices. With his cooperation, prosecutors considered their case airtight. Nine days later, the cooperating witness hanged himself in a jail cell. The suicide devastated the government's case.
Now, that created a major problem for the prosecution because since Guthrie could no longer be cross-examined, his information couldn't be used directly against Langan.
If the other bank bandits were going to be convicted, the FBI had to find someone else who could corroborate Guthrie's confession. In 1996, the legal case against the Midwestern bank bandits was on the verge of collapse. The chief cooperating witness had killed himself. Without his testimony, the evidence against his captured co-defendants was slim. Special Agent Joe Hendrickson spearheaded the investigation in Philadelphia.
These bank robbers were very, very good, and the evidence that they left behind at every robbery was zero. They were fully masked, fully gloved. Their weapons were untraceable.
Hendrickson helped convince Kevin McCarthy to plead guilty and turn state's witness. But prosecutors needed more than one cooperating felon to convict the others. Investigators focused on the man who had steered suspects into the Aryan Republican Army. Mark Thomas had turned Scott Stediford and Kevin McCarthy into outlaws. Thomas edited a newsletter and webpage for white supremacists. His literature and videos had swayed many young men into racist and anti-government organizations.
And we felt that even though he was not personally involved in these crimes, that he had caused these crimes to come about. And therefore he was responsible. And based on conspiracy laws, we felt that it was quite possible to go after him for conspiring to commit bank robbery.
The FBI made weekly contact with Thomas at his Pennsylvania farm. They wanted to know about his activities, but more importantly, they wanted to keep pressure on him.
15 years, you live here alone. I've had about enough of you guys coming over here and messing with me.
They made it clear that they suspected him and weren't going away.
Cool.
Kevin McCarthy told investigators that he and Scott Stediford had stayed at Thomas's home.
change your life. Yeah.
He acted like a father figure to them and warned them of the coming race war. He brought the young men to live in Elohim City, a white separatist compound in Oklahoma. During the summer of 1994, Thomas invited them to join the Aryan Republican Army. In mid-October, Scott Stediford agreed. He participated in his first bank robbery 2 weeks later. On November 13th, Thomas drove Kevin McCarthy to Arkansas for an introduction to Langan and Guthrie. The teenager heard them boast of successfully robbing banks throughout the Midwest. The 17-year-old joined up.
We found a better way to do it.
Agents also learned from McCarthy that Thomas took $100 in stolen money for the start of an Aryan war chest. Over the months of contact, agents caught Thomas in several lies about his activities.
This is my farm, and I don't need you on my farm, you know? So
They took what they had to U.S. prosecutors.
okay, I'm doing what he says.
The United States Attorney's Office decided that based on the cooperating witnesses' testimony, we were going to arrest him. Even though it was a very slim case, it was a close call, as the United States Attorney's Office would say, but we're going to put out an arrest warrant for him.
Thomas heard that the FBI was going to pick him up on a charge of conspiracy. He agreed to surrender after calling the media to witness the event. He told the press their presence prevented his assassination. Thomas pleaded not guilty at his arraignment hearing on February 4th, 1997.
No comment.
He asked to meet with the FBI the next day. That's where Mark Thomas caved. He signed a 7-page plea agreement that corroborated Kevin McCarthy's confession. The government's case was now solid.
This was the biggest surprise of anyone's involved in the case. The idea that the head of the movement, after 1 day in prison, would decide to completely cooperate was just unfathomable. But apparently our pressure over the 6 months of continually talking to him, and then the 1 night in prison, was enough for him to decide that he had been completely wrong in his ideals and that he wanted to, as he said, get right with God.
Mark Thomas was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison. Peter Langan was convicted on bank robbery and gun charges. He received life without parole. Kevin McCarthy got 5 years. His testimony helped convict Scott Stediford on 2 counts of armed bank robbery. The court sentenced Stediford to 29.5 years. In America, extremist groups enjoy the freedom to maintain their beliefs. They are constitutionally protected until they cross the legal line. If they engage in outlaw activities, they will find the FBI on a mission to stop them.